Hi there, travel lovers. Is your trusted cruise and Tauck Tour and Africa Safari expert Shawn Power here, and today I wanted to do another one of my story time videos. A lot of times when I do these videos, I'm answering questions from my clients on things like insurance or questions about airfare, or maybe I'm telling you about my review of a particular cruise line or an itinerary I did, or I'm just educating you on cruising or Tauck land tours in general. But today, what I wanted to do is kind of do a bit of a more of a fun session where I wanted to answer a question that I get very, very commonly. I've literally had it asked to me probably hundreds of times over the years, and that's not an exaggeration. And what happens is when I meet someone new, whether it's a new friend that's introduced to me, or I meet someone at an airport or at an event or wherever, at a party or whatnot. What happens is it always gets to where people, we always ask each other what we do for a living, and I tell people I'm a travel agent and that I own my own travel agency. And basically, of course, people want to talk about travel, so they always ask me more, and it always, ends up coming up that I've been to almost 100 countries. And when I tell people that, like almost 100% of the time, people ask me, what's my favorite place I've been? What's the best place in the world that I've gone to or that they could go to? And, I wish it was a simple answer. But basically, I've been to so many places. I mean, 90 odd countries. It's hard to narrow it down to just one favorite trip. So what I want to do today is answer a question, like I said, that I get commonly from people. And again, it's what's some of your favorite trips? So what I've done, I've been on 91 cruises and I've been on a half dozen Tauck land tours. So that's almost 100 trips. So I've kind of broke it down, and it's impossible to talk about all of them. But I've broke down to 9 of my favorite trips. So that's about 10% of them out there. And these are ones that just they absolutely stood out. There's no order to how I'm going to talk about these today. But what I will do underneath this video is I'll put in either, if I did a video review of that trip, I'll put it down here, or I'll even put a written review from my website at shawnpower.com. Point being, I'll put some more information below, but I'll just talk about the highlights today. So again, no particular order. One of my favorite trips I ever did, this would be, one of my top 9, is when I went to Australia and New Zealand. This was actually a Tauck land tour. And what stood out about that is, if you guys know me, I love cruises. I mean, like I said, I've been on 90 plus cruises. And it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do when I visited this part of the world. But because of feedback from clients and, colleagues and all that kind of stuff, I decided to do a land tour because I heard the waters were pretty rough down there. Sure enough, I did a cruise a few years later and the waters were absolutely rough. They were some of the roughest I've ever seen. And I didn't love the way that I also got to, interact with some of the ports. It was a little bit too far away and stuff when I did my cruise down there. So that's why I chose to do this Tauck land tour. And I'll put a video underneath this video, or a link to a video that I did. But what I loved about this trip, it was just a fabulous way to see this place. It was 3 weeks long, and we spent 10 days in Australia, 10 days in New Zealand. And the highlight, which I talk about in my other video review, is that we literally did private flights all around these countries. So we land in Melbourne, Australia, spend a bit of time there. We take a flight out to Ayers Rock. Again, this is a private flight for just 20 of us. It was like a charter flight. It was unbelievable. We spend the night there. We go up to Cairns, up to the Great Barrier Reef. Then we go down to Sydney. We spend a few days there. So like I said, we had 10 days in Australia, plus an extra couple of days when I flew in early. And then we did have to take one international flight, on a normal jet because they can't use the private flights for different reasons between the countries. But then we land in Australia, and again, 3 private jets from, we'll call it the middle of New Zealand down to the south part of New Zealand, and then we end up in the top part of New Zealand, up in Auckland. But again, it was just a fabulous trip because by using these private flights, it was like I literally saw 50% more than an average cruiser does. Everything from Ayers Rock in Australia, which few people get out to. We just had more time in each place because, again, we weren't wasting time at the airports. Sydney, of course, we had private tours at the Opera House, and we did private boat rides. And up in Cairns, we stayed in one of the most luxurious, resorts that I've ever been in this rainforest. I mean, it was absolutely gorgeous. So like I said, it was just a fabulous way to see things. We go over to New Zealand. We go to Peter Jackson's private museum. Again, we do some private boat tours in Milford Sound and Marlborough Sound. And we see the Maori, the cultural dance, and, the haka dance. And we tried some fabulous wines and foods. And it was an absolutely fabulous trip. Let's put it that way. So like I said, I'll put a link underneath this video to that one. But again, that's definitely got to go in my top 9. It's going to be my my Tauck land tour to Australia and New Zealand. Now, another one that I can think of off the, I want to talk about my top 9 is years ago I did this Africa River Cruise and Safari with AmaWaterways. Now, again, not just an Africa safari, but a river cruise and safari. And this is very unique. I mean, AmaWaterways is the only company who does this. since I've done this, I've literally booked this trip for dozens and dozens and dozens of my clients. Everyone who does it loves it. So what the difference is, I mean, for one, just doing an Africa safari is fabulous. If you've ever done one, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you've got to get on your bucket list. You know, you're going to go over and you're going to see all the different animals. And now on this particular trip, I went to South Africa. So basically, not only did we go on a safari and see, you know, everything from lions to leopards to, you know, zebras, elephants, you name it, we saw it all. We also spent a few days in Cape Town, which is a, you know, beautiful city where you get to go to Table Mountain, and we went out to a little island to see Nelson Mandela, where his prison was, and it was such a touching thing to see. We did some great wine tastings. We ended up going to Victoria Falls to see one of the most fabulous waterfalls in the world. We go to Johannesburg, you know, which is one of the main cities in South Africa. I learned a lot about apartheid, and you know, we went to one of the slums to see how, you know, people live, and it was such a surprise. I mean, it was such a touching experience as well. And of course, like we said, we also did a safari. So a lot of people would do a trip like this with, you know, Tauck or, you know, one of the different land tour companies. But point being, because I went with Ama, it was almost like the same thing where you do that safari, but there was also like a 4-night river cruise up on the Chobe River in the Botswana and Namibia area. So we spent 4 nights on this. This is like a 14-person little boat, like a houseboat almost, 2 decks, and this tiny little thing. And what an experience in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we were there with our windows open at night, and I heard a kill one night, and sure enough, the next morning we see the lion, and you know, they're I don't know what it was, their family or whatnot, feeding on this. I don't even remember what it was. I think it might have been a zebra if I remember. But the point being, I mean, it was just such a different experience to not only do the land safari like a lot of people do, but to do the water safari, because we saw crocodiles on the water and hippos, and just the way we even interacted with the elephants when we were on the riverboat versus the land tour was absolutely fabulous. So again, I'll put the review underneath here for that trip, but it was absolutely fabulous. It was, you know, one of my favorite trips ever. And again, what that was a South Africa, you know, safari, but again with a 4-night river safari, which just really added to the trip. It was absolutely fabulous. Now, another trip that I absolutely loved and was actually a real surprise for me was when I did a Tauck land tour in Japan. Why this was a surprise was because years earlier, I had done a cruise in Japan. And we touched some places and got to spend a few hours and, you know, that kind of stuff there. But I never really felt like I'd always wanted to go to Japan. It was one of my top places I ever wanted to go to, but I wasn't really impressed with it, if you want the truth. I mean, after I did my cruise, and we made 4 or 5 stops, and I always thought cruising was the main way to go there. But years later, because a lot of my clients kept saying this Japan trip is amazing, I decided to go back and really do Japan properly, in my opinion. And it was such a nice surprise, because what the difference was when I did it with Tauck, because it was on land and we went kind of more into the heart of Japan, I like to call it, I just got a much more, you know, way better feel for Japan. So again, basically, I got to try all the different foods. We went to Nobu, who's a favorite chef there, and we ate at his restaurant. We went to teppanyaki restaurants. We went to tempura restaurants. We had a 9-course traditional Japanese meal. Besides the food, we also go to like the local ryokins, I think is what they call it, which is like a traditional Japanese inn. And I slept on the futon and or on the floor mattress, I should say. Now, don't worry if you need a regular American kind of bed, you know, you can get that. But point being, that was such an experience. And we had on the kimonos and the different kind of robes and the shoes, and we did sushi making lessons and origami lessons, and there was flower making lessons, and I mean, it was unbelievable. We saw samurai shows, we saw sumo wrestler shows, we had a private geisha show. I mean, again and again, it was just like every day it was like, what is happening? Because again, I was in Japan years ago, just got a taste of it, thought I'd saw Japan, but this was like a totally different trip. So like I said, this has got to be in my top 9, because again, it was a fabulous trip. And again, I'll put a full review underneath this video. So everything I'm talking about, I'll put a full review underneath, but it was absolutely fabulous. So that was number 3, my Japan Tauck tour.